I found my husband in the living room with my son's fiancée, just hours before the wedding. My heart stopped. I was ready to confront him, but then a movement in the hallway froze me. It was my son, Jonah. His face was carved in stone. He looked at me and whispered, "Mom, I already know, and it's worse than you think." Hello everybody, thank you for choosing to stop here and listen to my story. Before we begin, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from? Please share in the comments so we can feel closer, no matter how far apart we are. Now let me take you into this story. I woke up before dawn, heart pounding like someone had knocked on my chest. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life, his wedding day. Yet lying there in my bed in Charleston, South Carolina, all I felt was dread. Not nerves, not excitement, dread. I'd been married to Grant for 28 years, and I knew the sound of his breathing better than my own. That morning, even in sleep, it was off, too steady, too rehearsed. He had become a man who carried secrets in the quiet spaces, and my body knew it before my mind admitted it. I got up at 5, made coffee, and stared at the magnolia tree in our backyard. For years I believed our family was unshakable. I devoted my life to Jonah, our only child, every homework assignment, every scraped knee, every dream. He was kind, thoughtful, the kind of son mothers pray for, and today he was marrying Sierra, the girl who seemed to shine like a magazine cover whenever she walked into a room. It should have been perfect, but perfection had started to feel staged, like a picture frame hiding cracks in the wall. By 7 I was pacing. I told myself it was just wedding jitters. But in truth, it was something heavier. For months, I had noticed the glances Grant gave Sierra when he thought no one was looking. The private conversations they brushed off as planning details. The way she laughed at his jokes longer than necessary. I forced myself to ignore it. You don't throw away nearly 3 decades of marriage over shadows and whispers. Still, the shadows had weight. At 9:30, Sierra texted me, "I'm coming by to drop something for the photographer. 5 minutes. I typed back, "I'm home." My fingers trembled on the screen. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. She stood there glowing in a white sundress, her hair tied back with a ribbon garment bag draped over her arm. She smiled politely, but her eyes were restless, scanning the house. "Is Grant home?" she asked, casual as you please. "He stepped out earlier," I lied. My voice sounded strange even to me. She walked inside, her perfume trailing behind her. I meant to follow her to the den, but something made me pause. A murmur drifted from the living room, my living room. I crept closer, my palms slick, and there they were, Grant, Sierra, inches apart, his hands on her arms. Her face tilted toward him like a secret being shared. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but intimacy has shapes beyond lips. Their bodies told the truth their mouths hadn't dared to speak. For a moment I couldn't move. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my ribs until I couldn't breathe. 28 years of marriage unraveled in the space between them. Every promise, every holiday, every memory of us as a family collapsed into something rotten and cruel. I wanted to scream, to drag them apart, to demand answers no answer could fix. But before I could, a sound froze me, the groan of the hallway floorboard upstairs. I turned. Jonah, my son, stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister as if it were the only thing holding him upright. His face was gray, his jaw tight. His tie hung loose around his neck, forgotten. His eyes, my sweet boy's eyes, looked shattered. He saw them, he saw everything. For a second, the 3 of us, me, Grant, Sierra, were suspended in silence, caught in a triangle of betrayal. But Jonah didn't look at them. He looked at me, straight at me. "Mom," he whispered, his voice raw, "I already know." He took a step down and I could see his hands trembling. "And it's worse than you think." The words hit me like glass breaking inside my chest. And in that moment I understood, this wasn't just my heartbreak, it was his. And whatever truth he carried would destroy far more than a wedding. The house was quiet after Jonah's words, but inside me everything was screaming. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from what he'd just seen, but there was no undoing it. The truth was no longer a shadow. It was flesh, breath, and betrayal standing in our living room. Later, when I finally sat alone in my office, I found myself sifting through memories like broken glass, sharp, dangerous, impossible to touch without bleeding. The signs had been there for months. Grant's sudden work trips that always came with vague explanations. Nights when he would shower the second he got home, his phone buzzing face down on the counter, locked with a new passcode he never explained. I told myself it was stress, the cost of chasing bigger contracts. I had always been the one who steadied the boat while he played captain. Why wouldn't I believe him? Then there was Sierra. At first, I told myself she was nervous around me. Plenty of young women are with their fiancé's mother, but it wasn't nerves, it was indifference. At family dinners, Jonah would talk about his plans, his career goals, the dreams he carried since boyhood. Sierra's eyes would glaze over, her hand sliding to her phone under the table. She'd nod, but it was the kind of nod that ends a conversation instead of encouraging it. And Jonah, my sweet boy. He tried to hide it, but I know my son the way I know the tides outside our window. He laughed less. He smiled more tightly, as though he were holding something back. There were nights he'd sit on the porch staring at nothing, shoulders hunched, a coffee mug forgotten in his hands. I asked if he was nervous about the wedding. He always said the same thing, "I'm fine, Mom, just tired." But tired was the word people use when they mean broken. Looking back, I see it now. The cracks had been spreading for a long time, and I chose not to see them. I told myself the lies women tell themselves when they're trying to keep a family whole. It's just stress. Every marriage has distance. She'll grow into our family. Jonah will be fine once the wedding's over. I silenced the voice inside me that whispered something isn't right, because facing it meant tearing apart the picture I had spent my life framing. That night, after the confrontation in the living room, Jonah knocked on my office door. His face was pale, his shoulders tense like he was carrying more than a 23-year-old should ever have to. He closed the door behind him and sat down on the edge of my desk, just like he used to do when he was a teenager asking for advice. "Mom," he said softly, "do you think Sierra really loves me?" The question landed like a blade. Out of everything he could have asked, it was the one I dreaded most. I opened my mouth to tell him yes, of course she does. It's just pre-wedding nerves, but his eyes begged me for honesty, not comfort, and I couldn't lie to him anymore. "Why do you ask?" I whispered. He hesitated, then looked down at his hands. "Because when she looks at me, sometimes it feels like I'm just a checkbox, like she's not seeing me, just what I represent, a stable life, a family name, a future she can control." My chest tightened. Jonah wasn't dramatic by nature. If he was saying this, it came from deep hurt. "And there's something else," he said, voice breaking slightly. "She's been close with Dad, too close. They say it's about finances and investments, but I know better. I've seen the way she looks at him, the way he looks at her. I wanted to reach for him, to erase the pain with a mother's touch, but before I could, he said the words that nearly knocked the air from my lungs. "I hired someone," he whispered. I stared at him. "You what?" I couldn't keep wondering. I couldn't marry her without knowing the truth, so I asked a friend, he works in digital security, to dig into her accounts, her emails, her texts. "And Mom," he paused, swallowing hard, "it's bad, it's worse than we thought." My heart sank. Shame and rage tangled inside me. How had it come to this, my son hiring someone to investigate not just his fiancée, but his own father? How had I missed so much? The answer was bitter but simple, because I wanted to, because I chose silence over suspicion, because I thought holding everything together was my job, even if it meant betraying myself. I sat there, staring at Jonah's haunted face, and realized something. Betrayal doesn't just come from lies. Sometimes it comes from the truths we refuse to see, and I had been refusing for far too long. We sat side by side at my office desk, the two of us lit by the blue glow of a laptop that felt more like an X-ray machine than a screen. The house was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional ping from my phone, vendors confirming timelines I no longer believed in. Jonah's hands hovered over the keyboard like he was bracing for recoil. I didn't hire a PI, he said finally, eyes fixed on the screen. I asked Micah, the kid who used to build Minecraft worlds in our living room and now wrote security protocols for a fintech startup in Austin. He'd been Jonah's friend since middle school, gangly, brilliant, the kind of boy teachers called promising, while other kids called him when they forgot their passwords. I remembered packing them peanut butter sandwiches and overhearing them debate aliens and encryption like both were inevitable. Micah knows what he's doing, Jonah said. And he cares about me. His mouth twisted at that last part like care itself could sting. He typed a password and opened a folder labeled with today's date. Inside were subfolders with names that felt like a verdict. Signal exports, iCloud backups, temp captures, encrypted threads. Each one seemed to subtract a little oxygen from the room. Start where you need to, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He clicked Signal Exports first. A chat window blossomed, Sierra's name at the top, Grant's number below it, not saved as a contact, just digits. Micah had pulled the messages from cached notifications and the rolling backups that cloud services make even after you think you've erased something. The thread began 6 months ago with logistics, venue questions, timelines. Do you have a copy of Jonah's guest list? Then the messages tilted. Grant, you looked incredible at the tasting. I couldn't stop watching you. Sierra, don't say that here. Grant, then tell me where. I felt the blood move from my face to some cold place below the floor. Jonah didn't look at me, he scrolled. The messages weren't pornographic. They were worse, low, intimate, made of the kind of sentences people write when they think words are a private currency. There were photos that weren't explicit, but every angle suggested the kind of closeness that dissolves families. The thread had gaps, vanished messages, missing days, but Micah's software annotated the holes with timestamps of deletions. What remained was enough. Jonah clicked into encrypted threads. Micah couldn't break these, he said. End-to-end is end-to-end if you do it right, but he pulled metadata. He opened a log showing dates and times Sierra and Grant had messaged through an app I'd never heard of, the sort with a logo that pretends secrecy is sophistication. The pattern was regular, deliberate weekday afternoons, late nights, a burst of pings on the day Sierra told me she was touring florists. It's not just the messages, he said, voice thinning. He opened temp captures. The screen filled with screenshots, Sierra's calendar entries cached by a cloud previewer, tiny thumbnails of appointments labeled like alibis. Site visit, caterer follow-up, design consult. Next to those were location pings from Grant's Google account. The kind you never remember you've enabled until they place you on a map. The overlap was merciless. I pressed my fingertips to my temples and forced myself to breathe through the throb. Jonah, I said softly, you didn't deserve this. He barked out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I keep trying to figure out what I missed, he said. I kept telling myself Sierra was stressed, that Dad was just being Dad. His jaw tightened, but then I started seeing it like a pattern instead of moments, and patterns don't lie. He clicked into one last folder, Contacts Anomalies. A spreadsheet opened, rows of names, numbers, last contact timestamps Micah had flagged. Jonah scrolled until he stopped at a line that made my stomach drop. Ezra, he said quietly. She's been calling Ezra. Ezra had been in Jonah's friend group since college, music-obsessed, funny, the friend who always brought extra chairs to cookouts. He'd been over to our house more nights than I could count, leaning against our kitchen island, telling stories big enough to fill a room. He was loyal, messy, good in the way people are when they come from less and build their own edges. How often? I asked, though the screen already told me. Every few days for the last 2 months. Late. He clicked open a partial export of texts Micah had recovered from Jonah's backup. They weren't explicit either. That's what made them dangerous. You get me in a way Jonah doesn't. I can't talk to him about the pressure. You're easy, Ez. Don't tell him, he'll misunderstand. Compliments sharpened into confidences, then into a language that lives under loyalty, the place where people test the limits of what they can take from someone else. She told me she was overwhelmed by work. Jonah said, reading, not seeing. Meanwhile, she's telling my best friend he's the only one who understands her. My chest ached as if a hand had closed around it. Sierra wasn't just cheating. She was rearranging the furniture of Jonah's world. Friends, father, fiancé, she had found the center and then set fire to it. I confronted Ezra last week, Jonah said. His voice was calm in the way voices get when the person using them has gone past anger to some white cold place beyond it. He swore nothing happened. He said she vented, that he was trying to keep her stable until the wedding, that he didn't want to hurt me. Jonah swallowed. He cried. I believed him, but now I think he was crying because he knew he'd already failed me. He rubbed the heel of his hand over his sternum like he was trying to iron out a wrinkle in a shirt he couldn't take off. I thought Dad taught me how to be a man, he said, but apparently what I learned was how to doubt myself and smile anyway. I turned toward him. You learned how to be kind, I said. You learned how to show up. That didn't come from his secrets. He shook his head. Mom, I'm not naive. I just wanted to believe that love meant safety. And now I'm watching the two people who were supposed to make my life safer, teaching me that love is leverage. The word landed between us like a dropped wrench. I reached for his hand. He let me take it. His fingers were cold, the way hands get in hospital waiting rooms. Listen to me, I said, and I could hear my mother's voice layered under mine, the way women's voices carry the women before them. What they've done is not a mirror. It's a mask. You don't have to put it on. He nodded, but his eyes kept going to the screen, to the proof he'd asked for and now had more of than anyone should. There's one more thing. He opened a folder titled Audio Clips. Micah pulled these from a shared drive that backed up Sierra's voice memo. She must have forgotten to exclude it when she set up her new phone. He hit play. Sierra's voice filled the small room, breathy, controlled, a performance with no audience but herself. I can't keep telling Jonah what he wants to hear, but if I pull back before the wedding, everything falls apart. Grant says to hold steady. They think this is about love, but it's bigger than that. I need to stop feeling bad about taking what I'm owed. I flinched. Jonah stared at the desk as if it could swallow him. He clicked another file. Ezra keeps asking if I'm okay. He's so easy to steer. I don't want to hurt him, but he'll be fine. Jonah will be fine. Everyone's always fine. He stopped the clip like he'd been burned. For a second, all I could hear was the air moving through the vents, the way sound stretches out when you're close to fainting. Jonah, I said again, because saying his name felt like building a small fence around him. You are not an obstacle course for other people's ambition. He blinked hard once, twice. I keep thinking I should have seen it, he whispered. That I should have stopped it. That I should have never let her meet Dad without me there. He laughed, a thin, tired thing, like that's a normal sentence for a groom to say. Guilt rose in me like a tide, and I didn't try to push it back. Some of this is on me, I said. I taught you to be polite when your gut said run. I taught you to give people context instead of consequences. I wanted this family to work so badly I let the rules bend around the wrong people. He looked at me then, really looked. You taught me to love, he said. That's not a mistake. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to climb into a version of the day where this conversation never needed to happen, but the only way out was through. What do you want to do? I asked. He exhaled, a sound with age in it. Part of me wants to disappear, call Micah, send him a thank you gift, torch the hard drive, move to Asheville and grow tomatoes. He scrubbed a hand over his face. But the bigger part of me, I want the truth where they can't dodge it. I want them to stop writing the story and handing me my lines. He slid a USB drive across the desk toward me. Micah mirrored everything. He said to keep this somewhere safe. He paused, throat working. He asked if you were okay. I'm not, I said, but I will be. I tapped the drive. We'll both be. Jonah nodded, then folded over at the waist like the weight had finally found him. When he spoke again, his voice was small. The boy voice I hadn't heard since the night he had the flu, and I promised the universe anything if it would cool him down. Mom, he's my dad. I know, and she was supposed to be my wife. I know, I said again, because sometimes those are the only two words that can hold a person together. He straightened slowly and took a breath like he was borrowing it. Then let's stop pretending we don't know what we know. Outside, the late morning had brightened. All sun on hydrangeas and rented chairs marching toward a future that no longer existed. Inside, my son closed the laptop, and with that single click, childhood ended. That night, after Jonah finally fell asleep in the guest room, the room where I used to keep Christmas boxes and old yearbooks, I sat alone in my office with nothing but the desk lamp and the hum of my laptop for company. The house was still, but my mind was on fire. I couldn't shake the words Sierra had recorded. They think this is about love, but it's bigger than that. If it was bigger than love, then what was it? Money, power. My father used to say, Belinda, people lie. But money never does. He'd been a banker in a small town, the kind of man who could read a ledger like it was scripture. As a child, I thought it was boring the way he always balanced checkbooks on Sunday afternoons. Now, with betrayal crawling through my house, his words came back like a command. I opened the file cabinet. For years, I had been the one who tracked our family finances, not because Grant couldn't, but because he didn't want to. I paid the bills, filed the taxes, monitored Jonah's college fund. I believed I knew everything. But as I pulled folder after folder onto the desk, I realized I had skimmed the surface, never looked deeper. The first red flag was in our joint credit card statements from last year. Charges from restaurants in downtown Charleston I'd never been to, intimate places with prefix menus. I checked the dates. One coincided with the night Grant told me he was stuck at a late client dinner. Another was Valentine's Day. He'd brought me flowers that night, lilies from the grocery store. The second red flag was stranger. A string of hotel charges, not luxury chains but boutique places, the kind of hotels you use when you don't want a paper trail at home. Some of them were billed under generic merchant names, but I know how to read a statement. Each was a night he told me he was on a work trip. Then I found the withdrawals. Small at first, $300 here, $500 there, spread across different ATMs. But as I lined them up on the spreadsheet, the pattern glared back at me. They weren't random, they were systematic. Every 2 weeks, almost like a paycheck in reverse. Over time, the total added up to tens of thousands. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just infidelity. This was fraud. My husband wasn't only betraying me emotionally, he was bleeding us dry. I leaned back in my chair, my father's voice in my ears. Money doesn't lie. And suddenly, I wondered how far back this went. The secret accounts, the hotel rooms, the dinners, it might not have started with Sierra. Maybe this wasn't the first time. Maybe the man I had loved for nearly 3 decades had been running 2 lives all along. A memory hit me. 10 years ago, I'd found a receipt for a necklace tucked in Grant's coat pocket. He told me it was for me, an early Christmas gift, but I never received that necklace. I brushed it off at the time, told myself he must have returned it, forgotten about it. But now, staring at these documents, I knew better. That necklace had never been meant for me. The shame burned hot in my chest. How could I not have seen it? Had I been that blind, that willing to play the fool? The questions clawed at me, but beneath them something harder rose up. No, betrayal wasn't my failure. Trusting isn't a weakness. It's what marriage is supposed to be built on. The failure wasn't mine, it was his. I gathered the papers into piles, hands trembling but deliberate. If Jonah was right, and I knew now that he was, then we couldn't just walk away quietly. Silence would make us complicit. If we confronted Grant and Sierra in private, they'd deny it, spin it, gaslight us until we doubted our own eyes. I'd seen Grant do it before with smaller lies. I thought of Jonah standing on the stairs, his voice raw. It's worse than you think. He deserved more than whispers and closed-door arguments. He deserved the truth, undeniable and public. I looked at the stack of evidence, statements, withdrawals, receipts that told a story more damning than any words could. My father had been right, money never lies, and tomorrow neither would I. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt clarity slice through the fog. We couldn't stop the wedding silently. We had to let the truth speak where everyone could hear it. And I promised myself it would. The evidence lay in stacks across my desk. Statements, withdrawals, receipts, the trail of a man who thought secrecy was the same as safety. I hadn't slept. By the time the sun cracked over Charleston, my coffee had gone cold twice, and my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Jonah came into the room still wearing the shirt from yesterday, his eyes rimmed red. He looked older, worn down in ways no mother wants to see. He glanced at the papers and then at me. "So what now?" he asked, his voice low. "Do we just call it off?" I shook my head. "Not like this, Mom. I can't marry her." That much is obvious, but I don't want to humiliate myself in front of 300 people. I'd rather disappear, cancel the wedding, send an email, move on. He said it like he was trying to convince himself more than me. He wanted escape, not resolution, and part of me understood. But another part, the part that had watched my mother survive decades of humiliation in silence, rose up inside me like steel. I saw my mother in the kitchen of our old house, folding laundry as if folding shirts could hide bruises of the heart. My father had been unfaithful for years, everyone knew it. He'd show up to church with lipstick faintly scrubbed from his collar, and she would paste on a smile that looked more like armor. "We don't air dirty laundry," she told me once when I asked why she stayed. "Families survive by keeping quiet." I'd believed her for a long time. But silence doesn't save families, it buries them alive. I looked at Jonah. If we walk away quietly, they win. They get to rewrite the story, make you look like the unstable one, make me look hysterical. Your father will smooth talk, Sierra will cry, and in a month they'll be living the life they stole from us while everyone wonders what's wrong with you. His jaw clenched. He didn't want to admit I was right, but he knew it. "This isn't about revenge," I continued. "It's about consequences. We can't stop them in whispers. We need the truth in a place where they can't twist it, where everyone can see it for what it is." Jonah ran his hand through his hair, a habit he had since boyhood when something weighed heavy on him. "Publicly, at the wedding, Mom, that's insane. People will never forget it." "Good," I said. "That's the point. They don't deserve to be forgotten. They need to be remembered for exactly what they are." For a long moment, he just stared at me, then slowly he nodded. "Okay," he said, voice flat but firm. "Then we do it right, we make sure the proof is airtight." We spent the next hour laying out everything: financial documents, emails, text exports, audio clips. Jonah was methodical, almost clinical, but every so often his face would crack and I'd see the hurt boy beneath the hardened man. My heart broke with each flicker. But I knew shielding him now would only make him weaker. When we finished, I leaned back in my chair. "We're missing one thing," I said. "What's that?" "Illegal teeth. We need someone who knows how to turn this into more than just a scandal. Someone who can make sure Grant's fraud sticks and Sierra's manipulation doesn't get brushed off as gossip." He frowned. "Who?" I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. There was only one person I trusted for this, and she was the last person I wanted to call. My younger sister, Lee. Lee had been a lawyer in Atlanta for nearly 20 years, brilliant and relentless. But she had also been the one to warn me about Grant before we married. "He's charming, Belinda," she'd said, "but charm is just polished control. Don't mistake it for character." I hadn't listened. We drifted apart after that, and when she cut ties with Grant completely, refusing to even visit the house, I defended him instead of her. Our conversations since then had been short, strained, polite at best. Jonah raised his eyebrows when he saw the look on my face. "You're thinking about Aunt Lee, aren't you?" I nodded. "She's the only one who can help us prepare this in a way no one can ignore. She knows the law, she knows Grant, and she doesn't owe him anything." He exhaled. "Do you think she'll even answer your call?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I have to try." The clock ticked in the silence between us. I picked up my phone, scrolled to her number I hadn't dialed in years, and hovered my thumb over the screen. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than dread. I felt resolve. "Mom," Jonah said, his voice cautious. "Yes, if she answers, what exactly are you going to tell her?" I pressed call, my pulse roaring in my ears. The phone rang once, twice. "That it's time," I whispered. "Time to end the silence." The line clicked. A voice came through, cool, familiar, and sharper than I remembered. "Belinda," Lee said, "what do you want?" And just like that, the battlefield had been chosen. The last time I had heard Lee's voice, it was clipped and final. "I'm not coming to Thanksgiving, Belinda, not while he's at the table. You'll see someday." Then silence, years of it. Now her voice on the phone was the same, sharp, unyielding, but under it I caught a note I hadn't expected. Concern. "Grant finally did what I warned you he would, didn't he?" she said. My throat tightened. "It's worse, much worse." There was a pause, then, "Tell me everything." Within 3 hours she was in my kitchen, dropping her leather satchel on the counter like a soldier setting down her gear. Lee had always carried herself with an edge, but time had only made it sharper. She wore a gray suit despite the Carolina heat, hair pulled back, eyes cool and calculating. I saw the lawyer first, my sister second. Jonah hovered near the doorway, unsure if he should hug her or salute her. "Aunt Lee," he said quietly. She gave him the barest nod. "Jonah, I hear congratulations are off the table." He flushed, then glanced at me. I caught the flicker of shame in his eyes, shame he didn't deserve. Lee noticed too, and her expression softened just slightly. "None of this is on you, kid, remember that." We spread the evidence across the table. Lee went through each piece with the precision of someone who had been building cases her entire adult life. She barely blinked at the texts, the photos, the bank withdrawals. But when I handed her the background check Jonah's friend had pulled on Sierra, she arched an eyebrow. "This girl is sloppier than I thought," she murmured. "You didn't know about the disciplinary warning, did you?" My heart lurched. "What warning?" Lee tapped the printout. "Last year, official reprimand from her firm, something about a forged invoice during a high-profile project. It got buried because her senior partner vouched for her, but the note is still in her record. Combine that with these bank anomalies." She trailed off, shaking her head. "She's not just ambitious. She's reckless, and reckless people always trip eventually." I sank into the chair, pressing my palms against the wood. All this time I thought she was too good for Jonah. Turns out she was never good enough. Lee leaned forward, folding her hands. "Belinda, listen to me. This isn't just about your husband's betrayal or Sierra's schemes. This is about how women survive in systems built to excuse men like Grant and protect women like Sierra, women who play by the same dirty rules. If you stay silent, you're teaching Jonah the same lesson Mom taught us. Smile, endure, pretend, and you're better than that." Her words landed like a strike, but instead of wounding, they steadied me. For years I had felt small beside Lee, she the brilliant lawyer, I the dependable homemaker turned accountant. But in that moment, I realized she wasn't here to remind me of my failures. She was here to remind me of my strength. We began to plan, not whispers in a back room, not a quiet confrontation that could be denied. No, we would build a moment they couldn't run from. Lee mapped it out like trial prep. The timing, the order of evidence, the visual impact. Jonah sat across from her, pale but resolute, nodding as if memorizing lines for a play he never wanted to perform. "What if they twisted on us?" I asked finally, my voice shaking. "What if Grant calls me hysterical in front of everyone? What if Sierra cries and makes me look cruel?" Lee met my eyes, steady as stone. "Then you keep your head high and let the evidence speak. Truth doesn't need to shout, Belinda. It just needs to stand in the light." We rehearsed until the plan felt like muscle memory. Lee would prepare the documents in binders, labeled and tabbed. Jonah would cue the projector when the officiant asked that fateful question, "Does anyone object?" And I would be the one to stand, to break the silence. The thought made my stomach twist. I imagine the gasps, the whispers, the humiliation of 300 guests turning their eyes on me. I don't know if I can, I whispered. Lee reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. You can, because this isn't about you anymore. It's about Jonah, about ending the cycle, about showing him that truth matters more than appearances. I hadn't held her hand in years. The touch unlocked something in me. Sisterhood I thought was gone, replaced now by a bond forged in fire. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone. When she left that night, her satchel heavier with copies of our evidence, I stood on the porch and watched her car disappear down the street. Jonah came up beside me, his face lit by the porch light. "Do you trust her?" he asked. I thought of our childhood, the way Lee used to defend me when other kids mocked my shyness, the way she told me truths I didn't want to hear, the way she walked away when I chose Grant over her warnings. "Yes," I said finally, "I do." As the night deepened around us, I realized something else. Lee wasn't just helping us destroy lies, she was helping us stitch back a bond we both thought had been lost forever. And in that moment, betrayal gave way just slightly to justice. Tomorrow, we would carry our truth into the light. The moment I stood, the air shifted. 300 heads turned in unison, a ripple of confusion racing through the garden. I felt the weight of every stare, the heat of judgment already forming, but I didn't sit back down. My legs shook, but my spine held. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearer than I expected. "But I do have a reason." Gasps broke the silence. The officiant froze, caught between ceremony and chaos. Grant tugged at my sleeve, his smile cracking. "Belinda, sit down," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Not here, not now." I shook him off, stepping into the aisle. My heart thundered, but my words steadied. The man standing beside me, my husband of 28 years, is not only unfaithful to me, he's been unfaithful to his own son. The guests erupted, voices rising in shock and disbelief. Phones appeared, hands trembling as they hit record. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the small flash drive Lee had prepared, and held it up like a blade. "I have proof," I said, turning toward Jonah. My son met my gaze, gave the faintest nod, and walked to the AV stand we'd set up for a slideshow of childhood photos. Instead of baby pictures, the projection screen flickered to life with emails, stolen moments in black and white. "Grant, you looked stunning at the tasting. Couldn't stop thinking about you. Sierra, don't worry. He'll never know, our time is coming." The crowd gasped. Someone cried out, "Oh my God." Sierra's mother clutched her pearls as if that could stop the words from being real. The next slide showed bank statements, withdrawals, hotel bills, luxury gifts, receipts tied to Sierra's name. A photo appeared of Grant and Sierra together at a downtown hotel, time-stamped, undeniable. "No," Sierra stammered, her face draining of color. "This is manipulated, this is." Her voice cut off as Jonah pressed play on a voice file. Her own words filled the air, sharp and damning. "I never loved him. Jonah's just a stepping stone. Grant is my real future. He understands me. He can give me what I deserve." The garden went still. Every guest, every parent, every friend stood in stunned silence, the mask ripped away. Jonah's shoulders squared, his eyes locked on Sierra. It wasn't heartbreak anymore, it was clarity. Sierra's father, red-faced and trembling, pushed himself to his feet. "Sierra, what is this?" His voice cracked between fury and humiliation. Her mother covered her face, unwilling to meet the eyes of the friends and colleagues she'd spent decades impressing. Grant finally surged forward, his voice booming with false authority. "This is a setup. She's nervous, that's all. Belinda, you've lost your mind. You're humiliating us for nothing." But before I could respond, Lee stepped from the back row. She hadn't been announced, hadn't even greeted me before the ceremony. She'd simply been waiting, quiet, prepared. She strode forward with the confidence of a woman who had spent 2 decades in courtrooms. "Actually, Grant," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "there's more." She held up a binder thick with documents. Financial fraud, forged signatures on loan application, withdrawals against the retirement account Belinda built, All in your handwriting, or should I say your forgery of hers. The crowd gasped again. I saw people shifting uncomfortably. Friends who had once praised Grant as a model family man now looking at him as if he were diseased. His face darkened, but he had no words ready, only stammered protests that fell flat against the mountain of proof. Enough, Sierra cried out, her voice breaking. This isn't fair, you don't understand. But before she could spiral further, 2 uniformed officers entered from the garden gates. Murmurs rippled as the sea of guests parted. Phones rising higher to capture the intrusion. One officer stepped forward, his tone calm but authoritative. Are you Sierra Langford? She froze, mascara streaking as she looked around in desperation. Yes, why? You're under arrest for suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud, he said, reciting the charge as he reached for her wrists. The second officer gently but firmly pulled her arms behind her back, the metallic snap of handcuffs echoing through the stunned garden. The silence broke into a chorus of gasps and shouts. Sierra's parents rushed forward, her mother sobbing, her father demanding explanations, but the officers moved methodically, unshaken. Grant stumbled, his composure cracking completely as he shouted, "This isn't about her, this is about," but no one was listening anymore. The cameras were on Sierra, the perfect bride now being led away in handcuffs, her lace gown dragging in the grass like a parody of purity. And I stood there, my heart hammering, knowing this was only the beginning, because Grant's reckoning hadn't come yet. Chaos erupted the moment Sierra was led away in cuffs. Guests stood in stunned clusters, whispering, some furious, others too fascinated to look away. Phones were raised high, screens glowing as they captured every humiliating second, the perfect bride transformed into a criminal spectacle. Grant shouted over the din, insisting it was all lies, a smear, a setup. But his voice was swallowed by the tide of voices, by the flashing cameras, by the unmistakable truth that had already scorched the air. He shoved past a few guests and bolted toward the parking area, his face flushed, his suit rumpled, dignity bleeding out of him with every frantic step. He didn't make it far. Jonah intercepted him near the edge of the lawn, Lee standing at his side like a sentry. For the first time, father and son locked eyes without the mask of family pleasantries. Jonah's voice was low, almost trembling. But the words hit harder than any shout. You don't get to run from this, Dad, not this time, I won't protect you. Grant's mouth opened, closed, searching for a lie sharp enough to pierce. Lee cut in before he could find it, her voice cold and surgical. We have documents, witnesses, recording. You forged signatures, you stole from your own family. Even if you slither past the scandal today, the law will catch up, and you know it. For the first time all day, Grant looked small, not furious, not defiant, just diminished. He turned away without another word, stumbling toward the gate, swallowed up by the glare of phones and the murmurs of people who once called him friend. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos ebbed. Guests trickled away in 2s and 3s, murmuring apologies they didn't mean, offering Jonah awkward pats on the back before fleeing to their cars. Within an hour, the grand garden we'd poured months of work into looked like the aftermath of a storm. Half-empty champagne flutes lay scattered on the tables. Bouquets drooped in the heat. Napkins and programs littered the grass like confetti after a parade no one wanted to attend. I stood at the edge of the lawn, shoes sinking slightly into the soft soil, staring at the wreckage of what was supposed to be my son's happiest day. The silence was surreal, thick, heavy, almost holy. Jonah appeared beside me, shoulders slumped, his tie loosened, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked older and younger all at once, like a man who had been forced to shed his innocence in a single hour. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, it's not just that they betrayed me, it's that I feel worthless, like I wasn't enough for her, like I was just filler until she got what she wanted. My heart clenched. I turned to face him, cupping his face in my hands the way I had when he was little and scraped his knees. Listen to me. Betrayal doesn't mean you're not enough. It means they were too empty to hold what you gave them. What Sierra did. What your father did, that says everything about who they are, not who you are. Tears slipped down his cheeks, silent but relentless. Then why does it hurt like it's my fault? Because betrayal cuts deeper than trust, I whispered. It cuts into your worth. It makes you question yourself when the truth is you did nothing wrong. You loved, you trusted, and that takes strength. He buried his face against my shoulder, his body shaking, and I held him as tightly as I could. In that quiet, broken garden, with the roses drooping around us and the champagne still bubbling in untouched glasses, I made him a vow as solemn as any wedding promise. We will rebuild, I murmured. On truth, not illusions, on love that doesn't hide in shadows. It won't be easy, Jonah, but it will be real, and real is worth everything. He didn't answer, just clung tighter. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of something small but alive in my chest. Not joy, not even relief, but resolve. The wedding was over. The lies had shattered, and from the ruins we would begin again. It has been 8 months since the day the wedding collapsed in on itself like a house of cards set aflame. 8 months since Sierra was taken away in a white dress that looked absurd beneath steel cuffs, since Grant walked out of my life for the last time, dragging his lies behind him like chains. The divorce went through faster than I expected. Lee handled it with her usual precision, slicing through Grant's defenses until he had no room to maneuver. The judge looked at the binders of evidence and barely blinked before granting me the house and restitution for the money siphoned out of our accounts. My accounting practice took a hit in those chaotic weeks. Clients left. Uneasy with the scandal, but steady work and time have brought it back. Numbers, after all, are neutral. They don't gossip, they don't betray, they just tell the truth. Jonah is healing piece by piece. He goes to therapy twice a week, something the Jonah of a year ago would have laughed off, but now he speaks of it like oxygen. He's left behind the corporate ladder he once thought was his destiny and found a new rhythm in urban farming. I watch him on weekends, dirt under his fingernails, sweat on his brow, smiling as he shows me the basil sprouting in his greenhouse. It feels good to grow something honest. He told me once, and my throat tightened with pride. Lee has become my constant. We talk every day now, sometimes about the case she's fighting, sometimes about what to cook for dinner. After years of silence, it feels like a wound I didn't realize was still bleeding has finally begun to scar over. We laugh more easily than we did when we were younger, and sometimes we cry too. She says betrayal has a way of clarifying things, of reminding us what's real. And she's right. Out of the wreckage, I found my sister again. A few weeks ago, I sat at my desk and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. For hours, I stared at it until finally I began writing a letter addressed to Sierra. I did not write to forgive her. I did not excuse her choices, but I wrote to remind myself that hate would not be my legacy. You took from us, I wrote, but you do not own me. I choose not to carry you in my heart. That is my freedom. I don't know if she'll ever read it. I may never send it, but the act of writing was enough. Sometimes late at night, I walk through the quiet rooms of my house. There are ghosts here, the rose arch that never saw vows, the dining table where laughter once covered tension, the office where I pieced together the truth. But the ghosts don't scare me anymore. They remind me. Here is what I've learned. Betrayal can burn your house down, but it can also show you which walls were never strong enough to stand. And so I build again, smaller, quieter, steadier, with my son, with my sister. With the parts of myself I thought were lost but were only waiting for me to reclaim them. If you've been through something similar, know this: you are not alone and you are stronger than the lies told about you. Thank you for walking through this story with me. May your own rebuilding be honest, and may your walls stand strong. This isn't a fairy tale ending. Life rarely is. My son and I didn't walk away unscarred, but we did walk away stronger. We learned that when betrayal strips you bare, it can also reveal the strength you never knew you had. And sometimes what rises from the ashes isn't a perfect picture, but something smaller, truer, and deeply human. I've come to believe this. Healing is not about erasing the past, but about planting something honest in its place. And in that soil, even the most broken heart can grow again. Now I want to ask you, have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to rebuild from the ground up? How did it change you? If my story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories of truth, resilience, and healing. Together, let's remind each other we are stronger than the lies told about us.